We're coming from Genesis chapter 37. Genesis chapter 37. And we are talking about Joseph. And if you would, we could even use him as an example of what we're just talking about. Waiting for your situation to get better. His situation never got bad because he always trusted God. He always remembered the promise. He always remembered all of those things. But for us, we might find ourselves in a Joseph type situation where it looks like everything's going bad. God has spoken something and everything's going bad. But we just have to remember who God is. We just have to remember everything that he's spoken about us, whatever he's spoken over us. Most importantly, that we just keep our eyes on him. We keep our eyes on him, and guess what? There's no bad situation. There's no situation that will be able to get us down. No matter what comes. Anything that comes, we'll be able to learn from. Whatever seems like a defeat, we'll be able to learn from it. Whatever seems like a victory, draw us closer to God, we'll learn from that too. But in Genesis chapter 37, I'm going to jump around from a few verses. The title of this series that we've been going through, we've been talking about being clothed in God's righteousness. The title of the series has actually been Joseph's Coats. And though we haven't even talked about Joseph up to this point, we've been talking about how God, in Isaiah 61 and verse 10, how God has clothed us. We're clothed in his salvation. We're wearing a robe of righteousness. We're decked out as a bridegroom preparing for the wedding, and we are adorned as a bride wearing ornaments and jewels. So today we're going to get into the clothes of salvation, the robe of righteousness, and just what it is and how it affects us and those around us. Amen. Genesis chapter 37. We know the account of Joseph. I'm going to read through, let's see, verses 26 through 33. From the King James Version, it says, "And Judah said unto his brethren, What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hands be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh, and his brethren were content. Then there passed by Midianites, merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. And Reuben returned unto the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit. And he rent his clothes, and he returned unto his brethren and said, The child is not, and I, whither shall I go? And they took Joseph's coat, and they killed a goat, and they killed a kid of the goats, and dipped the coat in the blood. And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father, and said, This we have found. Know now whether it be thy son's or not. And he knew it. And he said, It is my son's coat. An evil beast has devoured him. Joseph is without a doubt rent into pieces, torn into pieces. Joseph was the favorite of his father. Joseph's father Jacob, if we remember Jacob's account, Jacob fell in love with Rachel, and he had to labor 7 years for her. And at the end of those 7 years, Laban tricked him into marrying Leah, because Leah was the older. Leah had to be married first before Rachel could be married off. So he pawned her off on Jacob, if you will. So he married Leah, he married Rachel, he married the sisters, and Rachel was found to be unable to have kids at that point. But that didn't diminish Jacob's love for her. Leah was able to have children, and she kept rubbing it in Rachel's face, taunting Rachel about it. So Rachel sent her handmaid in to be with Jacob, so that she could say she had given him a son. Leah was having children. Rachel, by her handmaid, was having children. Leah even sent her handmaid in to be with Jacob. At the end of all of this, 12 sons were born. 6 to Leah, 6 to Bilhah, 6 to Leah, 2 to Bilhah, 2 to Rachel, and 2 to Zilpah, their respective handmaids. So Leah had the most of anybody. But of all of these, Jacob favored Joseph, because Joseph was, he said, the son of his old age. After Joseph, Rachel also had Benjamin, and then she passed on. But Joseph was Jacob's favorite, because he said Joseph was the son of his old age. But also because Rachel was his favorite. Rachel was the one he fell in love with, his true love. So this son of his old age, this son from Rachel, he felt the most love for, because Rachel, out of everything that was going on, Leah and all her sons were kind of born out of spite, to spite Rachel, to rub her face in it. And then the handmaids and they were his sons, and he cared for them, he kept them. But once Joseph was born of Rachel, oh, how he loved Joseph. Joseph was his favorite. Let's go back to chapter 37 just quickly. And I'm going to read verses 2 through 5. It says, these are the generations of Jacob. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah. Remember the two sons born of Bilhah, with the sons of Zilpah, and his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. He ratted on them. They were out doing something that apparently they weren't supposed to be doing. Joseph told. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. Again. And he made him a coat of many colors. And when the brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably about him. So Joseph already ratted him out. And then Joseph and Jacob now loves him more, not because he ratted him out, but because he was who he was, in this situation. And so right there it says they hated him. They hated him. Now he's got a coat, and they hate him even more. Verse 6. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. So the hatred for Joseph is just growing. He not only did he was Jacob's favorite, then he rats him out. Okay, then he has this dream, a couple of dreams actually, and basically says that all his brothers are going to bow down before him. Wow. So your little favorite, teacher's pet, if you will, your little rat Fink, now you're telling us we're going to have to worship you or bow down before you. You're going to have authority over us, you who are the youngest. Well, second youngest, because Benjamin was there. But you who are younger than all of us, now you're saying that we're going to bow down to you? Oh, you just see the fumes coming off of them. Boy, we really hate you. So, and then verse 11 caps it all off in Genesis chapter 37. It says, and his brothers envied him, but his father observed the same. This is after he shared the dream with them. So the brothers, they plotted against Joseph. They went out to feed the sheep one day. Took the sheep. We're in verse 37. We're in chapter 37, verse 13. And Israel said unto Joseph, do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said to him, here am I. And he said to him, go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. Go, he just sending him out to go see what's the deal. Are the brothers okay? Are the sheep okay? And Joseph agrees to do it. So he goes and looks for them. They're supposed to be feeding the sheep in Shechem, but they're not in Shechem. For whatever reason, they're not in Shechem. So they went, verse 17, Joseph goes look for them. It says, and the man said, they are departed hence. I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. So they said they were going to Shechem, and they wound up in Dothan. It doesn't say what they were doing in Dothan or whether or not they needed to get their father's permission, but they weren't where they said they were going to be. So now here comes Joseph. They're out there in Dothan doing whatever it is they're doing. Here comes Joseph, whom they already don't like. They already got all this hate for him because he's the favorite. He's a rat. And now he's got this dream that says, we're going to bow down to him. Verse 20, come now, brethren. When they see him coming, come now, brethren, let us cast him into the pit. And we will say some evil has... Actually, let me go to verse 18. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him, to kill him, to take him out. That's some hate right there. A lot of hating going on. The haterade was flowing. So, verse 19, and then they said one to another, behold, this dreamer cometh. And then verse 20, come now, brethren. It's like, let's not kill him. He's our brother. Let's not kill him. Verse 23, and it came to pass when Joseph came unto his brethren that they stripped Joseph of his coat of many colors that was on him. So to them, the coat of many colors represented Jacob's love for Joseph, his favor, his singling out of Joseph. Like we said like we pointed out in Isaiah chapter 61 and verse 10, which says God clothes us with his righteousness, and we're clothed in his righteousness. Then it's with our garments of salvation, and with like a robe of righteousness. Then we talked about last week how the prodigal son, when he came home, the father ordered the best robe to be placed upon him. So the adorning of a robe, the putting on of a robe has significance. It means something. To the prodigal son, it meant the father's receiving him back and putting him back in a right standing with the Father. We're clothed in salvation, and God gives us a robe of righteousness for his righteousness. So Jacob, giving his son this coat of many colors, says that you are in right and good standing with me. You are my favorite. And when the brothers, when they saw him with everything that had gone on, and everything that they saw when they saw Joseph, the favorite son, the tattletale, the snitch. Okay, I guess they didn't tell him snitches get stitches, but they saw it. He's the tattletale, and now he thinks he's going to be over us. But we're gonna bow to his authority one day. Let's kill him. No. Let's not kill him. Let's not kill him. But let's strip him of the robe. Let's take the robe away from him. See, that's what the enemy is trying to get us to do. He's trying to take our robe of righteousness away, because our righteousness speaks of our right standing with God. Our righteousness says that God has restored us and brought us back to a place of good standing with him, to where we're right with him. And the enemy is trying to get us to take off the robe. He's trying to strip us of the robe. He's trying to strip us of God's righteousness. So they take Joseph and they strip him down and they throw him in the pit. And they had the plan to kill him, and then they come up with another plan and says, okay, well, let's just sell him off then. Let's just see whatever money we can get for him for 20 pieces of silver. So there's 12 children. There's 12 sons. Joseph is there. Benjamin's younger than Joseph. Benjamin's still at home. So the 10 of them that are there, the 10 of them that are born of the women that his father did not have as favorites, Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah, all of their children, all of their sons conspired against Joseph. And so they go ahead, they sell him off, then they take the coat, they kill a goat, and they bring the coat back to Jacob and say, do you know if this is Joseph's coat? Let us know if you can identify this as Joseph's coat. Like they don't know. Like they don't. Trying to pull the wool over his eyes, if you will. And Jacob, he sees the coat. Yes. Oh, wow. And by all the evidence of what this coat has been through, it looks like an animal has torn Joseph to pieces. So in his mind, Joseph is no more. So in his mind, Joseph is no more. Our righteousness, Joseph's coat represented the Father's righteousness wrapped around him. The Father's love, the Father's affection, the Father's feeling for him above the others, unmistakably and undoubtedly above the others. And so they took this coat, they took this righteousness, and they stripped him of it. And in stripping him of it, they mutilated it. And they poured blood on it to make it look like something that it was not. And then they presented it back to the Father in a deceptive manner to make the Father believe that his son was dead. And Jacob had no other recourse but to believe that his son was dead. He didn't think it was within his own other 10 sons that they would carry out what it is that they carried out. But here they are using it. But for us, again, that's what God's righteousness is to us. It's a coat, it's a robe that the enemy sees as God's favor above all else. How much God loves us and what it is he's willing to do for us in clothing us with his righteousness. Let's fast forward to chapter 39. chapter 39. Starting with verse 1, and Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And then the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man. He was in the house of his master, the Egyptian, and his master saw the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. And it came to pass from the time that he made him overseer in his house over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hands, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. Joseph was in this high place. This guy gave Joseph so much control that Potiphar had given Joseph so much control in his own home that Potiphar he was in a place where he kind of didn't even know what he had. He'd have to go ask Joseph, so what do I have? And Joseph would break it down and say, well, you got this, and all you this, and this, and this. So Potiphar could go off and do whatever it is he needed to do, because home was taken care of. Home was taken care of. And it was being blessed. And he knew that he could see that the hand of the Lord was on him. This Egyptian could see that Joseph's God was taking care of him. And he says, as long as this man of God is in my house, and I'm prospering because of this, man. Oh yeah, you got this. Take this. It's all yours. It's all yours. So everything's going well, even though, just like we were saying earlier, when you keep your eyes on the Lord, when you remember, when you stay steadfast in Him, it doesn't matter what your situation is, because you're trusting God. It's already better than what it is. So here he is. He's been sold into slavery. He's been sold into slavery. But having been sold into slavery, where does he find himself? In the highest position in Potiphar's house. Wow. Potiphar, a captain of the guard, of the Pharaoh's own guard, in that house, running things. Just running things. So even though he was in the situation that he was in, God had taken care of it all. God had him in a favorable position in that spot. Verse 7, then it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph. And she said, lie with me. But he refused. And he said unto his master's wife, behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in this house. And he hath committed all that he has into my hand. There is none greater in this house than I. Neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? He just went right over everything. I'm not going to sin against my master. He said, my master has trusted me with all of this. How can I commit this great wickedness and sin against God? He didn't even throw her husband back on her. He threw God. He brought God into the situation. And it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph, verse 10, day by day, that he hearkened not unto her to lie with her or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business. There was none of the men of the house therein. So here he finds himself again with a plot against him. All he's doing is carrying out, doing what it is that he knows he needs to do. He goes out to find his brothers and bring back a report on them as his father requested, and he winds up sold. He's taking care of Potiphar's house, taking care of everything in Potiphar's house, not doing anything wrong, just doing what's asked of him, bringing prosperity into the man's house. And here's a plot against him because all the other men servants are gone. All the other servants were gone. A setup. Verse 12, and she caught him by the garment, saying, lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house, remember whom she had already sent out, and spake unto them, saying, see, he hath brought a Hebrew unto us to mock us, and he came into me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me, and he fled and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home. And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, the Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came into me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted my voice up and cried, that he left his garment with me, and he fled out. Here again, it's about Joseph's garment. It's about Joseph's garment. He was bought by Potiphar. He's been working in Potiphar's house, bringing prosperity to Potiphar's house. Potiphar could see that the Lord was blessing him, blessing Joseph. He could see that his own household was being blessed because of Joseph, because of the favor that God had, and it was overflowing Joseph and bringing even Potiphar this greatness. So the uniform, the coat that he wore was one of authority, one that identified him as the head over everything. Not that he was Potiphar's favorite, but he was Potiphar's number one. He was Potiphar's trusted man. And so when his wife, Potiphar's wife, contrives this plot against Joseph, because day by day she spoke to him. Day by day she spoke to him, and he refused, spurned her every day. But on this day, when she contrives the plot, everybody's gone. And she not only wants to entice him with her voice, but she grabs his coat and says, come lie with me. And without hesitation, he said no, and he beat feet. He fled. He got out of there in such a manner that he left his coat behind. Not that he took off his righteousness, because she had grabbed it. And had he made an effort or an attempt to get it out of her hands, that's just prolonging his time in her presence. And so he's like, nope, I gotta go. Got to get out of here. And so as he's leaving, and she's probably pulling on the garment, think about how the garb of the day was. It's not like he didn't have on a coat per se as a trench coat, a hoodie, like we might have had on today. But whatever it is, the manner in which he was adorned, that when she grabbed it and he ran, he came right out of it. He came right out of it. That's what I'm talking about. And so he's done the right thing. He's done the righteous thing to get out. But she wants to use his garment against him. Just like the brothers took his garment, mutilated it, put blood on it, and presented it to Jacob, and to make Jacob believe that he was dead. Now you got Potiphar's wife taking his coat, putting it next to her, and waiting for Potiphar to come home, and using his coat against him to make Potiphar believe that he had done something that he didn't do, to make Potiphar believe that he was somebody that he was not. And if Potiphar had thought over everything, if he had looked at big picture, he would have come to the conclusion that his wife was not telling the truth. If he had talked to his other servants, because it says that she spoke to him day by day. day by day. But on the day that she really made the plan and the effort to try to get him, she sends all the other servants out. So that means that every other day that she's enticing him, trying to talk to him, that they were there. So if he talks to any of his other servants, he'll find out, you know what? Your wife is a little loose. She's a little fast, like the old folks used to say. She fast. She hot in the pants or whatever it is. But he would have learned the truth. But instead, she took his garment that he left behind in defense of himself, in doing the right and best thing for himself and getting out of there. And she used his garment against him. And so he winds up in jail. So by Joseph's garments, because of what his garments represented, he wound up in a pit. Then he wound up in a prison. But him being who he was, the favor of God that earned him those coats, couldn't be outweighed by the situation. Could not change his situation. In fact, the stripping of his coat of many colors and having him be thrown into a pit was the catapult that got him sent to Potiphar's house, into the highest position that Potiphar could give him. He went from the highest position that his father could give him. By rights, as the second youngest son, all the older sons were supposed to have gotten all the privilege, all the favor. Because you think about, let's go back to David, whenever the prophet was there to anoint a king. Who got presented first? The oldest. And then in succession after that, and David being the youngest, just got overlooked. So Joseph is in the position of the second youngest. So he should not have been getting the privileges that he got. He should not have been getting the favor that he got. He should not have been getting, by right and tradition, he should not have been the favorite, if you will. But things being what they were, and Rachel being his original first love, he was his favorite. Joseph was his favorite. And this favor caused him to be hated by his brothers. But God had given Joseph that dream. God gave Joseph that dream. God gave Joseph the dream, and Joseph shared it. And that was also part of the motivation that got him thrown into the pit. But see, the pit was a catapult to Potiphar's place. Potiphar's place. And then once he got into where God had intended him to be in Potiphar's place, even that wasn't the end of it all. Because that's a pretty high position. The captain of the guard. The captain of the guard. And you're the number one person in his house, taking care of things in such a manner that he comes to you to find out what he has. Wow, that's God doing something. But guess what? That wasn't the end. That wasn't the end of the story. That wasn't the end of the road. That was just another catapult. And both times his coat was used against him to make somebody that loved him, make somebody that trusted him, believe that something was not true about him. With Jacob, his coat was mutilated and blood thrown on it to make Jacob believe that he was dead. With Potiphar, his coat identified him. With Jacob, his coat identified him. This was Joseph's coat. With Potiphar, this is the coat of the authority of the man that you put in authority. Potiphar had to have recognized that coat, because Potiphar must have given him that coat and said, this is the coat that you will wear as the authority, as the head of my house. This will be your uniform. This coat will say that you have authority in my house. But every time he got into that position, every time he found himself in that place, the enemy's plot against him was to use his garment, his clothes, that righteousness that was placed upon him, that favor that was placed upon him. See, the world, the enemy tries to do that. The enemy wants to do that with us. The righteousness that God has given us, he wants to use it against us. He wants us to think that the righteousness, not our righteousness, because our righteousness is as filthy rags before the Lord. But when we walk in God's righteousness, when we adorn ourselves, when we carry ourselves, when we parade ourselves, when we present ourselves in the righteousness that God has presented us with, that our Father, the coat of many colors that our Father has adorned us with, the robe of authority and highest position that Potiphar has wrapped around us. But see, even greater than Jacob, even greater than Potiphar, God's robe of righteousness around us evokes even greater feelings from the enemy, from the world. Because they want to do everything to strip us of that robe. They want to do everything to strip us of that righteousness. It's no coincidence that the thing that identified him, that represented the favor, the authority, was stripped from him in one case, was taken from him as he fled in another case. No coincidence that both times his garment was used to make the ones who loved him, who trusted him and put him in authority, to make them believe that something was true about him that was not, that he was dead, that he was could not be trusted. But you see, our righteousness that comes from God, the enemy wants to use that against us. He wants to use that against us because the world is telling us that our righteousness, that as we the righteousness, I keep saying our righteousness, but the righteousness that we are adorned in, the robe of righteousness that we are adorned in, they keep wanting to tell us that we're overdressed for the situation. They keep wanting to tell us to take off that righteousness because it's not correct. It's not politically correct. They want us to believe that by walking in God's favor, that by living according to his word, that we're somehow the wrong ones, that we have the wrong perspective on things. But that couldn't be further from the truth, because God is the one. He's directing this whole thing. He's got a place where he's trying to get us to. Just like he had to get Joseph to the #1 spot in Egypt, up under the Pharaoh himself. In his father's house, the father, the head, the patriarch, and Joseph was favored, right? Potiphar, the captain of the guard, in his house, Joseph was #2 there. And God was using that to get him to just if you picture like trampolines, him bouncing from one spot. He bounced out of the pit. He bounced into Potiphar's house, into prison. From the prison, he bounced into the palace. Pit, prison, palace. Pit, prison, palace. Father's house, Potiphar's house, palace. Favored. Trusted and given authority. Favored and trusted and given authority by Pharaoh himself. So God, his robe of righteousness is taking us places. The righteousness that God clothes us in, the garment of salvation, that robe of righteousness, is our passport to places. God has taken us great places. But see, on the way to those great places, there's going to be a pit. There's going to be a prison. But see, even in the pit, when his life was being contemplated to take his life, one of the very ones who plotted against him, who hated him, spoke up on his behalf. No, we're not going to kill him. Let's not kill him. Favor. That's God's hand of protection. That's God's hand of protection. His coat, his righteousness, what God had done for him, and the dream that he spoke. God, every step of the way was God getting him closer to the fruition of the dream. Then once he's in the palace, once he's in the place, this is the timeline. This is, remember, just said Joseph was 17 years old when all of this happened. He was 17 when it all started. By the time Joseph gets to the palace where Pharaoh is putting him in place, Joseph was 30 years old. 13 years from when he had the dream to getting to the palace. But just getting into the palace, to the place where Pharaoh would put him into that trusted position, 13 years. He's not even in the place yet. He's not even in the situation yet where his family is going to be bowing down to him. He's not even in that position yet. That's another 14 years away. So 31 years from the promise to the palace. I won't even say the palace, because it was 17 years from the promise to the palace. 17 more years from the palace to the fulfillment of the promise in the dream. 31 years from dream to fruition. 31 years. What kept him the entire way? His robe. Because once he got to the palace, you know he was adorned in palace gear. He had on the king's paraphernalia. The king had given him the ring that said, "This man is mine. I put him in this position of authority." This robe of righteousness that God has clothed us in is taking us places. It's taking us places. It's not a roller coaster. You can call it a roller coaster. High points, low points. But it is incumbent upon us to keep God at the center of this. It is incumbent upon us to stay focused on what God has promised. Every promise. If God has given you a promise in His Word, and He has, then know this. The righteousness He has clothed us in is what is carrying us to the fulfillment of that promise. The world is going to do a lot of things along the way to try to make us not walk in what that robe represents. Joseph's coat of many colors was taken away, mutilated and used against him, but it didn't change his father's favor towards him. His coat in the hands of Potiphar's wife was used against him. And it changed Potiphar's attitude towards him, but it didn't change God's purpose. Didn't change God's purpose. In fact, it fueled God's purpose. It pushed God's purpose. It highlighted, emulated. It was all about God's purpose. It was all about God's purpose. Whereas Jacob thought Joseph was dead and that he would never see Joseph again. Where Potiphar had Joseph imprisoned and he thought he would never see Joseph again. Imagine Potiphar's surprise when years later Joseph is placed number 2 position in the land. Joseph could have very easily come back and said, "Potiphar, your wife lied on me. Your wife lied on me. You believed her. You didn't ask anybody else. You just took her word. based on circumstantial evidence, based on the fact that you found my coat in her hands. You didn't ask how it got there. You didn't ask why it was there. But he didn't, because he had God's plan in his mind. He had God's plan driving him and motivating him. Not his own, not any selfish reasons, not any selfish motivations of his own, but God's plan. God's plan. So for us as believers today, if we remember that we are clothed in God's righteousness. I'm going to turn to Isaiah chapter 61 and verse 10 real quick. It says, I will greatly rejoice in the Lord. My soul shall be joyful in my God, for he hath clothed me with garments of salvation. He has covered me with the robe of righteousness. I will greatly rejoice in the Lord. My soul shall be joyful in my God, for he hath clothed me with the garment of salvation. He has covered me with the robe of righteousness. Note what it says in here. I will greatly rejoice in the Lord. My soul shall be joyful my soul shall be joyful in my God. Why? Not because I have a great job. Not because I had a good day. Not because, oh, I'm driving this fly fancy car. Not because, oh, thank you, I live in this great house. I will rejoice greatly in the Lord because he hath clothed me with garments of salvation. I will greatly rejoice in the Lord. When we find ourselves in a place where we're looking around and everything's coming down upon us and we're not feeling the love. It's not feeling like the best of days. I will greatly rejoice in the Lord because I am clothed with garments of salvation. That's the kickstart we need. When we feel depression coming on, when we feel oppression coming on, when we feel any of those negative essions or whatever it is that try to come into our life, I will greatly rejoice. That's the kickstart that we need. That's the cold slap in the face, whatever it is. That's our motivation, and that gets the engine started. Because I am clothed with salvation, because I have on the robe. He has covered me with the robe of righteousness. See, being covered means we're no longer vulnerable. Being covered means we don't experience shame. Being covered means that they don't see things that they're not supposed to see. Being covered by God's righteousness. We are covered by God's righteousness. Being covered by God's righteousness means that things that aren't intended to get to our inner parts can't get there because we're covered with God's righteousness. So when the enemy's telling us all these things, and he's using the voice of friends, he's using the voice of family, he's using the voice of, just or strangers to tell us all these different things that aren't true, all these different things that tear us away, that are trying to get us turned away from God. I will greatly rejoice in the Lord because I am clothed in garments of salvation. I'm covered with the robe of righteousness. I am covered with the robe of righteousness. And I'm covered with the robe of righteousness. Nothing can get in. Nothing can get in. I am protected. So let's walk through our days. Let's walk through each moment covered in that righteousness. Amen. Amen. Come on and give God some praise. Because he's that loving, true God that